Welcome to Fable and Fact. We're diving into one of the wildest success stories on the global stage, Singapore's rise from chaos to cash. Picture this, a tiny island, barely a speck on the map, clawing its way from slums and strife to skyscrapers and staggering wealth. In 2022, Singapore's GDP per capita hit a jaw-dropping $82,794, according to the World Bank, making it one of the richest nations on Earth. 60 years ago? It was a different story. Poverty, riots, and a GDP per capita that wouldn't even buy you a coffee today. So, how did this little underdog become a global heavyweight? Let's unpack the epic tale of Singapore's transformation, led by the legendary Lee Kuan Yew, a guy who played by his own rules and won big. Let's rewind. Singapore's story kicks off way before it was the shiny city we know today. Smack in the middle of Southeast Asia, it's parked at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, right where the Malacca Strait, a superhighway for trade, meets the sea. That prime location made it a hot spot for colonial powers. The Portuguese, Dutch, and eventually the British all took a swing at it. In 1819, Sir Stamford Raffles rolled in, planted the Union Jack, and turned Singapore into a free port for the British East India Company. No tariffs, just trade. It was a gold mine move. By 1900, Singapore was one of the busiest ports in the world, with about 200,000 people calling it home. But don't get it twisted. Singapore wasn't some paradise. It had no natural resources to speak of, just its spot on the map. The British didn't exactly pour money into it either. They let it run wild. Gambling, smuggling, you name it. Gray area businesses thrived. Then World War II hit like a wrecking ball. Japan took over in 1942, ousting the Brits and leaving Singapore in shambles after 3 brutal years. When the war ended, the British stumbled back in, but the damage was done. Slums sprawled everywhere. Poverty was the norm, and racial tensions between the Chinese, Malays, and Indians were a ticking time bomb. By the 1950s, the British Empire was crumbling, and Singaporeans were fed up. Independence was brewing, but it wasn't going to be a smooth ride. Enter the hero of our story, Lee Kuan Yew. Born in 1923 to a well-off family, Lee Kuan Yew was no stranger to ambition. He studied law at Cambridge, soaked up the vibe in London, and came back to Singapore fluent in English, Mandarin, and Malay. This guy was sharp. Think lawyer turned revolutionary with a knack for winning arguments. In 1954, he co-founded the People's Action Party, PAP, with a crew of brainy anti-colonialists. 5 years later, at just 35, he was Singapore's first prime minister. The catch? Singapore wasn't fully independent yet. It was still a British colony with some self-governing wiggle room. Lee had a vision, though. He didn't just want freedom, he wanted Singapore to thrive. But the road ahead was rocky. In 1963, he pushed for a merger with Malaysia, thinking a bigger federation would give Singapore stability and an economic boost. It sounded good on paper, Malaysia, Singapore, and a few other regions joining forces. But it crashed and burned fast. Racial clashes erupted, with Malays and Chinese at odds, and the Malaysian government wasn't having it. In 1965, they kicked Singapore out. Lee broke down on live TV, tears streaming as he mourned the breakup. Suddenly, Singapore was alone. A 281-square-mile island with no resources, no allies, and a laundry list of problems. Crime was through the roof, unemployment was sky high, and strikes were constant. The population, about 1.6 million then, was a mix of 75% Chinese, 15% Malays, 7% Indians, and a sprinkle of others, all eyeing each other suspiciously. Lee wasn't fazed, though. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, tossing out the rulebook and writing his own. His style? Pragmatism. If it worked, he used it. Capitalism, socialism, whatever. Results mattered, not theories. First up, Lee had to stop the bleeding. Singapore was a mess. Racial riots, political instability, you name it. His fix? Unity through language. He made English the official tongue, a bold move in a place where Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil were the norm. Everyone had to learn it. Schools, businesses, government, no exceptions. Why English? It wasn't about kissing up to the West. It was about giving Singapore a neutral glue to hold its diverse pieces together. Plus, it opened doors to the global economy. Today, 48% of Singaporeans call English their first language, and among kids under 10, it's 75%. That's a game changer. But language alone wouldn't cut it. Housing was a disaster. 70% of homes didn't even have sewers after the war. Lee's solution was radical. Build public housing for everyone, not just the poor. Enter the Housing and Development Board, HDB. They churned out modern apartment blocks called HDB flats at warp speed, mixing races in every building to force integration. The goal? Home ownership for all. By offering these flats at subsidized prices, think 30–50% below market value, the government made sure nearly every Singaporean could own a place. Today, 80% of the population lives in HDB flats, and 89% own their homes, numbers that blow most countries out of the water. Stability didn't stop there. Lee leaned on the British Navy, still stationed in Singapore, to keep things secure while he figured out the next move. Those troops weren't just muscle. They pumped cash into the economy, accounting for 20% of GDP in the 60s. Lee sweet-talked, and maybe strong-armed, the Brits into sticking around until 1971, even snagging a $62 million loan, in today's dollars, to ease the transition. It bought him time to build a foundation. With the chaos under control, Lee turned to infrastructure. Singapore's 728 square kilometers, about a quarter the size of Hong Kong, needed to work smarter, not harder. The HDB flats were just the start. Entire towns sprang up, complete with schools, shops, and parks, all linked by covered walkways. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional. Classic Singapore. Then there's transportation. Cars? Forget it. With space at a premium, Lee's government jacked up the cost of owning one. You need a Certificate of Entitlement, COE, which can run you $74,000 for 10 years, on top of the car's price. A Tesla Model 3 in Singapore? Try $200,000. In the US, it's $40,000. Most folks stick to the world-class public transit, buses, trains, the works. It's cheap, clean, and efficient, keeping the streets clear and the air breathable. And cleanliness? That's where Singapore gets wild. Lee's team didn't mess around. Littering fines start at $730, chewing gums banned, since 1992, thanks to cleanup costs, and even feeding pigeons can land you in hot water. Break the rules 3 times and you're out $3,700. Harsh? Sure. Effective? Absolutely. Singapore's spotless streets and green spaces earned it the Garden City nickname, and it's no accident. Here's where Singapore's rise really takes off. Lee knew the island couldn't lean on farming or mining. It had nothing but people. So he bet big on human capital. Education became an obsession. The government pours 20% of its budget into schools every year, and it shows. Singapore's students consistently top global rankings in math and science. Universities like the National University of Singapore and Nanyang Technological University are Asian powerhouses, drawing talent from everywhere. Back in the 80s, they rolled out streaming, sorting kids into academic tracks based on ability. It was brutal but effective, churning out a skilled workforce fast. Critics hated it, labeling kids at 10 years old. Ouch. Singapore's since softened the approach, switching to subject-based banding in 2020. But the focus on meritocracy stuck. Hard work pays off here, and the culture reflects it. With a sharp workforce in place, Lee went after foreign cash. He turned Singapore into a magnet for multinationals. Tax breaks, top-notch infrastructure, and zero corruption. Companies like Shell and ExxonMobil set up shop and jobs followed. By 2023, foreign direct investment hit $194 billion per the UN. Singapore's secret sauce? It's small but mighty, a stable, business-friendly hub in a chaotic region. Lee's playbook wasn't all sunshine. Some moves were straight-up bizarre, but they delivered. Take the gum ban. It's quirky, but it kept maintenance costs down. Or the housing quotas, mandating racial mixes in every block. It forced people to live together, and over time, they got along. Then there's the Central Provident Fund, CPF, a mandatory savings scheme where workers stash 20% of their pay, matched by employers, for housing and retirement. It's why Singapore's household debt is just 47% compared to 73% in the US. The result? A country where 9 out of 10 people own homes, the streets gleam, and the economy hums. The World Bank's Human Capital Index ranks Singapore #1 globally, with an 88% chance a kid born today gets top-tier education and healthcare. That's Lee's legacy: practical, ruthless, and wildly successful. So, how did Singapore go from chaos to cash? It's all about Lee Kuan Yew's no-nonsense vibe. He didn't care about economic dogma, capitalism, socialism, whatever. If it worked, he ran with it. He stabilized the mess, built a backbone of housing and transit, and turned Singapore's people into its superpower. In 60 years, this speck of an island went from third-world struggles to a GDP per capita that rivals the US, hitting $82,794 in 2022. The story's not over, though. Next time, we're digging into Singapore's money moves, how it manages its wealth and keeps the dollars flowing. Trust me, it's just as mind-blowing. If you loved this ride through Singapore's epic rise, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. See you next time.